Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is a book review entitled Al-Farabi's Philosophy of Plato and Aristotle, written by Al-Farabi. So we're going to talk about the background of the author first. Abu Nasr Al-Farabi, or his real name is Abu Nasr Muhammad bin Muhammad Al-Farabi, was probably born in 870 in a place called Farab. In his youth, he moved to Iraq and Baghdad, and in 943 he went to Syria and Damascus. He was often called the second teacher, following Aristotle, who was known as the first teacher. He may have gone to Egypt, but he died in Damascus in December 950, or maybe January 951. The scholar has disputed about his ethnic origin. Some claim he may be Turkish, but more recent research point him to be Persian. So, Abu Nasr Al-Farabi, he was one of the earliest Islamic intellectuals who was instrumental in transmitting the doctrine of Plato and Aristotle to the Muslim world. He had considerable influence on the later Islamic philosophers such as Avicenna. He was outstanding linguist who translated the great work of Aristotle and Plato and made considerable addition to them of his own. He earned the nickname, as I said, the second master or the second teacher. Other work that Al-Farabi has done in his life, first is to separate philosophy from theology. The second is Al-Farabi laid down in Platonic the qualities necessary for the ruler. The third one, the best source of Al-Farabi's classification to knowledge in his kitab Ihsan al-Ulum. And there's a lot more of his his contribution to Islamic world and to all of us. That's all.
Next, I will talk about Al-Farabi's reputation. Al-Farabi was known as the second master, or the greatest philosophic authority next to Aristotle. This reputation was established due to his scientific and philosophic work that propelled his commentaries on the individual works by Plato and Aristotle. Besides, Al-Farabi's reputation on socio-political matters is not less than his fame in philosophy, in view of the fact that socio-political issues that have been prominent topics in philosophy in the time of ancient Greek philosophers such as Aristotle, Plato, and also Socrates, and up to our present time. Okay, if we look to the title of this book, and if you might wondering what kind of book is this, I can say that this book is a philosophical foundation for Al-Farabi's political work. In this book, Al-Farabi presents three separate and largely independent accounts in philosophy in his own name and in the name of Plato and Aristotle. Okay, so basically in this book it contains about the attainment of happiness, which Al-Farabi requests the reader to make clear to himself that Plato and Aristotle have the same aim or purpose. According to the issue that arise in this book, the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle present a position that seems to stand in sharp contrast with, if not to contradict, with Al-Farabi's teaching in his popular political work. Therefore, it is mandatory that one should undertake a proper investigation and also the fresh examination of the political work in the light of the result of this investigation.
Al-Farabi begins his book, The Attainment of Happiness, by stating that nations and citizens of cities attain earthly happiness in their first life and supreme happiness in life beyond the fulfillment of four human things, which is theoretical virtues, deliberative virtues, moral virtues, and practical arts. Earthly happiness is important in this life for the achievement of supreme happiness in the afterlife, but it is obviously incomplete and secondary to supreme happiness. God has created us for the attainment of happiness, the absolute perfection. To Al-Farabi, everything that allows a person to achieve happiness is good, and anything that hinders a person from achieving happiness is bad. Happiness is attained when a person's soul attains perfection, in which no material substance is required to survive. One need not only to recognize and be mindful of happiness, but must also seek happiness and make it the purpose of life. If one's desire for happiness is small and one's intent in life is different, the outcome would be bad. The main theme and discussion of the book is about the attainments of happiness, the human things through which nations and citizens of cities attain earthly and supreme happiness in the life beyond theoretical virtues, deliberative virtues, moral virtues, and practical arts. Therefore, Al-Farabi's conception of knowing what is good and bad is essentially identical as described in the Quran. To this basic Islamic concept, Al-Farabi adds two important elements. He defines it as political science and makes it a prerequisite for the attainment of happiness, which he previously defined as the purpose of human existence. Al-Farabi describes the leader of the city as the one able better than anybody else to identify every action conducive to happiness and guide others to true happiness and the actions leading to it. Therefore, the leader is the one who best understands political science and is most able to guide others to happiness. Al-Farabi discusses in great detail the way of attaining and achieving happiness more than discussing the nature of happiness itself. Existence as defined by God in the Quran provides a basis upon which to examine Al-Farabi's theory of happiness. It is now clear that in Islam, happiness, the path to happiness, and the struggle are clearly defined. God created man to achieve happiness in the next life through a clearly defined struggle in this life called jihad. This framework as defined by Islam left little room for Al-Farabi in defining his theory of happiness. The similarities to Plato and Aristotle are evident in Al-Farabi's discussion of happiness in that happiness is an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue and is sought for itself. So there are three main aspects of happiness in which Al-Farabi divides from Greek philosophy, which are Al-Farabi explicitly spells out the teleological process that man was created by God to achieve happiness.
Next, we move to method of organization. First, table of contents. This book begins with introduction which the author gives briefly explanation about this book, which they explains the special importance of this work as a corrective to the general modern view of Arab thought. There are 3 parts that they discuss on this book, which are 1. The attainment of happiness. 2. The philosophy of Plato, its parts, the ranks of order of its parts, from the beginning to the end. And 3. The philosophy of Aristotle, the parts of his philosophy, the ranks of order of its parts, the position from which he started and the one he reached. And lastly, the notes to the Arabic text of the attainment of happiness, which can make readers easily understand the note and index. Second, the tone and style of the book. This book will be of incomparable value to those who are interested in the way which the major ideas of Plato and Aristotle had been accepted, understood, and developed by the Muslim thinkers within the confines of Islamic culture milieu. The kind of audience is being addressed is the serious student of philosophy and as well as historian. On this book, there are also has a helpful discussion of the points which cry out on every page for explanation and such notes, and every issues that they discuss, the author will provide with the statement from Plato and Aristotle's book.
The next is the main idea of this book. The main idea of this book are the attainment of happiness, attached to 4 kinds, which are virtues, deliberative virtues, moral virtues, and art. Humans seek for this attainment of happiness by seek for knowledge and study about it. In Al-Farabi's opinion, involvement in the community of being is important for the achievement of happiness. He claims that an isolated individual cannot achieve all the perfection on his own and without the assistance of many other individuals. According to Plato, a certain knowledge and certain way of life is the source of happiness and perfection of mankind. Plato explained in his book, Meno, there are 3 suppliers of the knowledge and way of life, which is investigation, art, and faculty, according to which that investigation proceeds. The first one in Plato's book, which is Euthyphron, where explained about the amount of religious investigation and the religious syllogistic art is not sufficient for supply in knowledge and way of life. Secondly, in book known as Cratylus, the former art does not supply the knowledge at all. This further explained in book Ion that knowledge is supplied by poetry and what the value of poetry is for being human. The generally accepted poetic method does not ever supply any of this at all, but that is lead one far away from it. Thirdly, in the book of Plato known as Gorgias, art of rhetoric does not supply us with that knowledge or the way of life. Fourthly, in other book which is Sophists and Euthydemus, the art of sophistry does not supply the knowledge or lead to a knowledge useful either in theory or in practice. Last but not least, Plato explained in his book Parmenides the dialectical investigation does not supply for the knowledge because another faculty is needed along with, and in addition to, the faculty for dialectical exercise. We can sum up by these 5 investigations that all the generally accepted scientific or theoretical art does not supply to this knowledge of the being or that way of life. When it comes to Aristotle's philosophy, he sees the perfection of man as Plato sees it and more. He saw it to start from a position anterior to that from which Plato has started due to man's perfection is not self-evident or easy to explain it by a demonstration leading to certainty. And he saw 4 things that everyone pursues from the outset and considers desirable and good while they are desired and pursued by nature, as it were from the beginning. And the soundness of the human body, the next is the soundness of the sense, and the soundness of the capacity for knowing how to discern what leads to the soundness of the body and the senses. Also the soundness of the power to labor at what leads to their soundness. Philosophy of Plato and Aristotle presents a position that seems to stand in sharp contrast with, if not to contradict, Al-Farabi's teaching in his popular and political works. Plato's philosophy and Aristotle's philosophy have the same purpose, and that Plato and Aristotle intended to present the same philosophy or had the same end in view when presenting their philosophies. Finally, the example of the author's insight. The example of the author's insight in this book are theoretical virtues consist in the sign whose ultimate purpose is to make the being and what they contain intelligible with certainty. This knowledge is in part possessed by man from the outset without perceiving how he acquired it or where it comes from. This is primary knowledge. The rest is acquired by meditation, investigation, and entrance, instruction, and study. The first premises are known by primary knowledge. On their one proceeds to the subsequent knowledge gained from investigation, inference, instruction, and study. By investigation or instruction, one seeks the knowledge of things that are unknown from the outset, when they are being investigated and their knowledge is sought. They are problems, and afterwards, when men by interference or study has been led to conviction, opinion, or knowledge about them, they become conclusion. And that's all. Thank you.